who's in charge of wind on the screens over there. So let me see.
Today's session on a new global initiative to help countries more effectively act on climate change. I hear that we are competing with a number of other great sessions at COP. I know we have a number of people joining virtually as well, so I want to thank you for joining us here today. My name is Alex Moroner, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the Alliance for Global Water Adaptation, or AGWA. We're very excited to share more information about the Climate Action and Support Transparency Training, or CASTT Adaptation Academy, which is a multi-year training program designed for national climate focal points and ministerial representatives, particularly those from developing countries. And we find ourselves at a critical juncture as countries are working to accelerate and amplify efforts to adapt to the worst impacts of climate change. All the while, a relatively small number of individuals play an outsized role in whether or not we can meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. The Adaptation Academy aims to provide these individuals with direct technical support and peer-to-peer connections so that they can learn, share knowledge, and build networks as they focus on the adaptation and reporting aspects of the enhanced transparency framework under the Paris Agreement. In today's session, you'll hear more about the global consortium of partners behind the program under the leadership of the UNFCCC. Leaders from several of the partnering institutions will highlight the regional approach taken, and we'll hear more about the dire need for adaptation capacity building at the national level. Finally, we'll hear from several participants themselves who took part in the first cohort of the Adaptation Academy over the last couple of months. Now, we're reserving some time at the end of the session for some questions and answer and discussion, and we look forward to engaging with you directly during today's session, as well as going forward. For now, I'll turn it over to Mr. Jigme from the UNFCCC Secretariat to give you a better overview of the broader CAST program and its Adaptation Academy. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Good afternoon, colleagues. Great to be here and see you. I am Jigme, and I'm a manager in the Transparency Division in the UN Climate Change Secretariat. So let me give a brief overview of the what we call as Climate Action and Support Transparency Training Program. It addresses the needs of developing countries to develop their technical capacity and know how to effectively implement the Paris Agreement and be able to report on actions taken and progress achieved in climate mitigation, adaptation, as well as support received, needed and received. The primary motivation behind the whole concept around this training program was to address the current gap in existing mode of technical capacity development. What we see, and in particular, what we are aiming to achieve through this training program is to have a long-running, dedicated program that provides a professional, semi-professional training. And you will see that to that end, you will see that we are now working with academia institutions in addition to government partners. We also want to complement the short-term in-country training workshops and seminars that have been offered by a number of partners on the ground. But our assessment here is these short-term training programs are quite often not sufficient to impart in-depth knowledge that one would require to be able to, do a thorough assessment at the national level. And then we also want to address the need for knowledge that reflects latest outcomes from the negotiation, as well as scientific community. And then finally, our hope is that through this training program, we will be able to create a vibrant community of climate change practitioners with insight and competence to implement the climate change actions nationally, but also to promote exchange of lessons learned and experiences amongst peers. Sometimes I believe that the peer exchange amongst experts from similar circumstances can be a very powerful capacity building tool. So with that conviction in 2016, we started this training program by providing or launching a training on greenhouse gas inventories. And that training program, it is usually a 4-week long. And by the end of that training program, we believe that the participants are able to go back and start applying their skills, knowledge, and contribute to the capacity, to the inventory development. And then after that, the second piece of the training program was focused on enhanced transparency framework with emphasis on policy impact assessment, particularly in area of mitigation. And then the final piece of jigsaw came into place together with this launch of what we now call as Adaptation Academy. This Adaptation Academy brings 5 institutions together, including the Alliance for Global Water Partnership, Asian Institute of Technology, IHE Delft Institute of Water, Korean Environment Institutes, Korean Adaptation Center for Climate Change, and finally, Oregon State University. This training program or Adaptation Academy will, to extent possible, aim to address the main challenges that we see being experienced by developing countries. And these challenges mostly relate around methodologies and tools, data and information, and also institutional setup and arrangement nationally, both for implementation as well as reporting. Our hope is that this training program will be able to enhance technical capacity of experts for planning, policy framework, coordination across ministries and sectors, working with private sector, looking at financing options, and also it will look at sector-specific issues such as water, agriculture, disaster risk reduction, energy, cities, so on and so forth. And then part of the emphasis will be also on, once you have this climate assessment, adaptation assessment, and implementation plan in place, and start implementing, then the other piece, part of the piece of this training program is also about how do you bring this information into the convention or Paris Agreement process. Because I think it is also important that the intergovernmental process has credible, quality information so that it feeds into the negotiation process and thereby allow parties to make informed, evidence-based decision. So originally our plan was to roll this out training program as in person. However, as we know, in the last 2 years, because of unfortunate incidents which is beyond our control, that was not feasible. But we did not want us to stop from rolling out this training program. So as an interim measure, we had rolled out the first phase of training program as a virtual training. Our hope is that we will be able to reconvene this training program in coming years, starting from next year as in person. And our hope is that we will be able to do much more better job in enhancing the technical capacity. So in this year's training program, we have rolled out, 95 participants participated, and the plan is that we will open the application process for next year's training program sometime in the first half of the year. So stay tuned and reach out to us in the event you are interested to participate in this training program yourself, or you wish to nominate someone from your ministry, from your agency. In closing, I sincerely want to thank our partners involved in setting up this training program. As you will see in subsequent this thing, we have partners from government representative, as well as non-governmental organization and academic institutions. This goes on to show that if there is a will, people from actors from different background can come together and deliver on a common cause, which is much needed on the ground. In getting up to this stage, it was not an easy task. However, with the commitment and hard work from all the partners, we managed to roll this out, and we in the secretariat were extremely happy and proud that we managed to achieve this. So let me stop here and wish you a very enjoyable remaining time here in Glasgow. I hope I wish you a very successful stay and stay safe, and thank you very much.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much, Jigme. So I would actually like to invite one of our partners, John Matthews from AGWA, who has just arrived, to take his seat also on the podium, and then we will continue on with our presentation today. I would now like to invite Dr. Eddie Moores, who is the rector of IHE Delft Institute for Water Education. IHE Delft is also one of the key partners in establishing and launching this training program. So Dr. Moores, over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry that I could not be in Glasgow physically. Would have been nicer, but also with already mentioned COVID measures, sometimes traveling becomes quite a challenge nowadays. I would like to start by saying that IHE Delft is an institute that specializes in water, and that directly is also the reason why we are so interested in this Adaptation Academy. And that has to do with the fact that a lot of the measures that have to be taken for adaptation are linked to water causes, but also to water solutions. And at IHE Delft, we're working, say, from the more technical side towards the governance side and to the social side of issues that are related to the water part. And I think that if we want to make a step forward, then implementing the NDCs and the commitments that are in those NDCs for the different countries on the level of adaptation are quite important. If you look at the recent study that was done by Dr. Leiter, he looked at how many countries that have adopted a national adaptation plan, and he looked at 70 countries that did that. There were 60% of the countries that did not yet had a monitoring and evaluation program in place, meaning that it's quite difficult to know where we're standing and also if we're able to achieve the goals. What was just mentioned before me as well is that if you want to make a progress and if you want to sit at the negotiation table, especially with the different members together, and then you have to know what's happening there. But I think not only for the international negotiation table, I think also for the national plans that you would like to implement, it's important if your local policies are not only there, but if you're also having the effect that you are hoping that those policies will have. So we hope that with this academy and with the possibility to provide training to different regions, we can support that. IC Delft itself is primarily focusing on the African region. So I think the earlier call for participants globally, I would like to extend that. And also, if there are people interested from the African continent for a follow-up course, then please contact us. That's also true for the other regions. But as we are ourselves at the moment dealing with Africa, I would like to give a second call out for partners from Africa to let us know if they're interested and if they also are interested to a partnership with us. I think with that, I would like to give the floor back to you, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moors. I would next like to invite Dr. Shin from the Korea Adaptation Center for Climate Change. Dr. Shin, you have the floor.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. It is my great pleasure to attend the COP26 Adaptation Academy side event and to have an opportunity to deliver remarks here in Glasgow, UK. Dear my adaptation colleagues, the pandemic served as a signal for stronger actions in the face of global threats caused by anthropogenic interference. Thankfully, the Paris Agreement to tackle climate change, which is the most severe global threat is in full operation starting this year, and it emphasizes the importance of international cooperation on adaptation efforts. Therefore, the Korean Adaptation Center for Climate Change of the Korea Environment Institute has come forward to share our knowledge and experiences in adaptation-related actions with those in need, particularly the developing countries by co-organizing the UNFCCC CASTT Adaptation Academy. The Korean Adaptation Center for Climate Change, namely CASTT, is the main operating body for adaptation policies and activities, providing technical support and policy advice to the Korean government. Ministry of Environment established CASTT in July 2009 inside the KEI. And CASTT's main mission is to assessing climate change risks and supporting to develop NAP and subnational NAPs with using the scientific results. And we also do the important things, which is facilitating domestic and international cooperation and communications, and also in presenting and reporting these actions to the international communities. The CASTT is co-organized the Global Adaptation Week in 2019 with the UNFCCC, which held a series of events, including Global NAP Expo. More than 600 decision makers and expertise gathered and discussed innovative ways to adapt to climate change and build a climate resilient society. Indeed, the CASTT planned to hold a second adaptation week in 2020 and to also in this year 2021, but unfortunately we couldn't make it due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I sincerely hope the bigger adaptation event attracting the more people could be held next year. Based on our experiences and expertise, this year the CASTT held the very first Asian Pacific Adaptation Academy in collaborating with the UNFCCC secretariat and the Asian Institute of Technology from 11th to 15th October for 5 days. 30 trainees in total from 15 Asia Pacific countries participated in the online training. The courses covered the topics of climate change science, climate risk, and vulnerability assessment, national and subnational adaptation-related process from planning to evaluation to its implementation. All of the programs were for the enhancing transparency framework under the Paris Agreement. I believe that it was such a valuable opportunity to both organizers and attendees to move forward together towards achieving the global goal of enhancing adaptive capacity and strengthening resilience and reducing vulnerability to climate change. Thank you again all for being here today, and especially to the co-host of this event, the UNFCCC Secretariat, Alliance of Global Water Adaptation, Asian Institute of Technology, and IHE Delft Institute for Water Education, and Oregon State University. Be safe all, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shin. I would now like to hand it over to Dr. Eden Woon, the president of the Asian Institute of Technology, who's joining us online. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I too apologize that I have to do this in a virtual manner, and I cannot be in Glasgow at COP26, but for reasons that other people have spoken because of the global pandemic. But I give you warm greetings from the Asian Institute of Technology, which is an international institute of higher learning with social impact with innovation as a core element and the motto of our strategy. As an example of putting these values into practice, we're proud to serve as a partner in the Climate Action and Support Transparency Training, CASTT Adaptation Academy. In fact, climate change is one of 5 thematic focus areas for AIT, which has figured into AIT's research and capacity building agenda since several decades ago through our schools and dedicated outreach centers. Let me give you a few examples. Since 2001, AIT has been closely involved in the Technology Needs Assessment TNA program. In 2013, AIT became a consortium partner of the Climate Technology Center and Network. In 2015, we hosted a regional forum on climate change, RFCC, on low carbon and climate resilient societies, bridging science, practice, and policy for Southeast Asia, and the key message from that forum were presented at COP21 in Paris. In 2016, we established Climate Change Asia, CCA, as an initiative to build capacities of developing countries to develop bankable climate projects. AIT offers master's and PhD programs on climate change and sustainable development. And only recently, we established the Global Water and Climate Adaptation Center at AIT for water-centric adaptation solutions to climate change. With vast experience and expertise working in the Asian Pacific region for more than 60 years, AIT is committed to assist developing countries in building the capacities for sustainable and climate resilient development. As we know, any response to climate change involves 2 approaches: mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation is largely about gas, where adaptation is water. It is rightly said that regardless of current or future emissions, adaptation is an unavoidable endeavor. Also, it is said that climate change is a global problem, but requires regional and local solutions. Hence, the need of the hour is to devise adaptation strategies and plans specific to regional issues like weather extremes, increased floods and droughts, wildfire, cyclones, etc., and their impact on all spheres of human and natural systems. This new capacity building program, the CASTT Adaptation Academy, is designed to meet this need by providing training, mentorship, and a support network community of practice for national climate focal points and ministerial representatives from developing countries in the Asian Pacific region. I believe that for global communities, actors, and donors, this is a great opportunity to invest in capacity building initiatives on climate adaptation. CASTT Adaptation Academy can help developing countries enhance their climate resilience to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. We at AIT are proud and honored to be part of this effort. Please stay safe, all of you, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Woon. And I would like to thank all of our partners as well for their time today. For those of you especially coming in all the way from Bangkok at this late hour. I had the pleasure of working with all of our partners this year, and the rich expertise that you bring and your experiences, I think, has really benefited the students of this training program. And we look forward to further collaboration with you. So now I would like to move on to the next part, where we will hear some country perspectives on the need for adaptation capacity building. I would like to invite Ms. Henna Lotia from Pakistan, who is a development professional, and she has over 20 years of technical experience on this area in various aspects of capacity building in the areas of environment and climate change, water resources management, and recently she has also been working on the NDC of Pakistan. So with this, I would like to hand it over to Ms. Lotia.
Thank you very much. Thank you, UNFCCC, AGWA, and all the other co-hosts for inviting me to this session. I wanted to give a country perspective from a country like Pakistan, which is very vulnerable to climate change, 8 on the Global Risk Index. And if you look at the nationally determined contributions that have been submitted by Pakistan, there are at least 4 priority actions which have been mentioned. For example, one of them says that, by 2030, 30% of new vehicles sold will be EV, electric vehicles. By 2030, 60% of every energy produced will be from renewable energy. We'll shelve the 2 new coal power plants. There'll be no imported coal power plants installed in Pakistan. And there'll be investment in nature-based solutions. So these are, some of the priority actions which have been mentioned. And they all, point towards a saving of approximately 22 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions. Now, it's easy to give these actions, but how do you really implement them? That's the challenge. And that's exactly, and how do you fulfill these commitments? What is required? And that's where the challenge is. And that's, I guess, the link with the need for adaptation capacity building. If you talk about knowledge, basic knowledge about climate change, of course, the people from the Ministry of Climate Change in Pakistan might be very knowledgeable about climate change issues, and the UNFCCC processes, and the financial resources which are available and how to access them. But where does the action lie? The action lies in sectoral ministries where the emissions are going to be reduced, where adaptation planning is really going to make a difference. And if you think about, these ministries and their team, which is a part of those ministries, the knowledge will be very limited about climate change. Similarly, when you talk about scientific and technical capacity, that will be very limited. If you go to agriculture, health, energy ministries, they would be doing the work as they have been doing for the past many years. But in terms of how to integrate climate change within agriculture, or how to even calculate emissions, those kinds of technical capacity buildings is lacking. How to do economic costing because of climate change, how to design projects, how to plan projects, these kinds of capacity buildings are missing. Then you talk about tools and frameworks which are available. There might be many on the website. There might be many which have been developed by many institutions. But do these ministries, the sectoral ministries, for example, the Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Energy, a Ministry of Commerce, do they know about climate change tools which are available? Probably not. Then if you talk about the planning, resources, and the political support which is needed, these are three important components which are missing. How do you cross-reference climate change in national and provincial sectoral policies and plans? Do we have the capacity to do that? Probably not. Some policies will need to be revised because of climate change or refreshed. Do we have the capacity to even view those policies and make those changes? Probably, maybe not. How do you develop climate smart schemes and projects? Can we do that? Are there any budgets which are set aside for climate change purposes? Is there any climate change budgeting which is happening or not? Probably not. So the whole planning cycle will need to embed climate change. And for that, training and capacity building is a must. There are different sectoral ministries in Pakistan. So climate change is one of the ministries, but it's working in silos. Does it have the capacity or the convening power to engage different other ministries? I'm not sure. And then if they're unable to do so, then how will embedding take place? So, we need to think about all those issues as well. Then we need to build strong institutions, which can help in terms of decision-making, which is based on evidence. For example, the Pakistan Meteorological Department, the Global Change Impact Study Center, SUPARCO, they are doing some research, but are they doing research which looks at the trends because of climate change and how things will be impacted, how sectoral ministries should take forward? Probably we need to think about that. And when you talk about implementation and during implementation of projects, there are many projects in which we can look at what are the carbon emissions which have been reduced. Can we assess them? Do we have the capacity to assess the reduction in carbon emission? Those kinds of capacities are lacking. So in conclusion, there are two things that I would like to mention. One is the capacity to envision co-benefits, not only adaptation and mitigation. Co-benefits is the real term these days. And the second one is the partnership element. If we work in silos and if the Ministry of Climate, or we leave things to the Ministry of Climate Change and think that, climate change is going to be embedded, then I'm sorry, it's not going to work. So these are some areas in which, I feel that, capacity really needs to be built. And such kind of a program can be very useful for people in different ministries, and not only Ministry of Climate Change. They have had many opportunities. I think now is the time to reach out to other ministries and departments and see how climate change can be embedded. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Hina. I think you have touched upon a really important part of talking about integration and building other ministries together. So this training program so far is looking at that. Diverse number of participants have already taken part and shown their interest on this training. So with that, we have a pre-recorded message from some of our trainees this year. And I will now hand it over to my colleague Alex to present that. Thank you.
I am a development and management officer, and I work for the Climate Change Commission, which is tasked to coordinate the climate policies of the government. So we are tasked to monitor and craft reports both for domestic and international commitments and requirements. And then, of course, we craft the national communications, the Philippine delegation positions.
It's a pleasure for me to be here on behalf of the Department of Adaptation and Resilience of the Ministry of Environment of Panama. I'm in charge of following the implementation of the NDC for adaptation, specifically for the sectors of resilient human settlements and sustainable infrastructure.
I am a part of the Sustainable Development and Regional Planning Division at the Planning Institute of Jamaica, and I am the climate change focal point for the division. The PIOJ is the foremost planning agency of the Jamaican government, and we seek to initiate and coordinate the development of policies, plans, and programs for the sustainable development of Jamaica. And of course, climate change plays a big role in that because it affects all of those things.
My work is in working with the National Development Program, and also to propose solutions in the program of climate resilience of population, and also to propose a budget and to make a follow-up of climate actions.
We're a part of processes such as, the crafting of Jamaica's first adaptation communication. So we're currently in the process of doing that. And the National Adaptation Plan, as you mentioned. We've been very busy to accompany the updated NDC. We've also recently launched the NDC Implementation Plan.
I also deal with tracking the local climate change of action plans of the local government. So that is what we are capacitating our partners at the local level for them to come up with action plans specifically for CCDRR. And yeah, of course, I also interface with the team who handles the broader M&E system of the Philippines.
And I participate in the updating of the nationally determined contributions, and as I said before, and I'm participating in the implementation process of the nationally determined contributions and adaptations for the resilient human settlements and sustainable infrastructure sectors. We are currently reviewing the progress of the NDCs after a year that we have sent to the convention. I also work as part of the team that built the M&E system for adaptation in Panama.
As policy coordinators, we every now and then we have to package climate change, our materials, our messaging in the most creative but most straightforward manner, so we can just get the message across. Based on my experience, communicating climate change is really a challenging task, especially to our partners at the subnational level. So it is really difficult to make them or to communicate what was the difference between the adaptation and the existing socioeconomic development challenges that we have.
We have all hands on deck. We're working with consultants, working with the different government ministries and departments and agencies to try and execute these plans as best as we can. As a small island developing state, that there are capacity issues, and we're in the process of working through that. How do we build capacity to meet all the different reporting requirements to actually execute the plans?
We have also a challenge of lack of skilled staff in exposure and vulnerability assessment, and also in I think project management, project design, and in fundraising.
I got interested in the academy to further elaborate on climate change issues and how to develop adaptation actions, and to receive clarification on some aspects of climate change adaptation.
I was drawn to this course because I want to further expand my knowledge in climate change adaptation and mitigation.
Since I work with the unit tasked to develop reports on climate action, I just wanted to have a well-rounded knowledge about what we should be reporting, especially for adaptation. So it's essentially, I just wanted to enrich what I already know about adaptation, and then reconcile this with domestic and international reporting requirements.
The main reason that I decide to enroll in Adaptation Academy is to help a lot of our populations who are too vulnerable, especially in sectors like water access, or foods, and also housing.
The course highlighted that holistic planning and management is very necessary for climate change adaptation. Another aspect that I think was quite helpful and practical was the opportunity to become more familiar with the reporting requirements of the UNFCCC. Yes, there are a lot of online resources, but I find when you have a practical session that really helps people to create a visual, so to speak, of how to move forward. So I thought that was very good, and I'm looking forward to an expansion of that.
Although adaptation does not have quantitative metrics to measure progress, as in the case of climate change mitigation, it is important to rely on scientific basis to continue making efforts that lead to good adaptation to climate change through universal indicators. Climate change requires the participation of all. It requires more research, and it is important to have a community for the exchange of experiences and adaptation.
I just really wanted to hear how the resource persons see the topics from their perspective. So yeah, while the guidelines, literature, or manuals exist, I am more interested in how the experts or the resource person handle the topics, because I can learn how to better communicate with climate change. So especially the importance of reporting. It really resounded to me the principles of transparency and accountability. So especially as an employee under the government, it is our responsibility to report to our constituents who should, of course, gain from what we are doing on adaptation and mitigation.
It is natural to link with others to exchange some experiences of works in our countries and how to help people or localities or other stakeholders to adapt.
I think the group work was a useful way of learning what other countries go through with their efforts in adaptation.
It allowed us to learn about progress at the regional level, in addition to the fact that many countries in the region are experiencing similar situations at the political, social, and economic levels. This is why it's good to know how they have been able to overcome certain barriers or challenges that may exist, so as not to start from the scratch, but to continue developing knowledge for the region.
Through the different case studies that were brought, that were explained during the course, that provides a base that I can refer back to see how I can relate those to the Jamaican context. What lessons can I take from that to adopt to the Jamaican context?
It will be also important to help us to work to integrate climate change adaptation in the development plan, and also to help them to capture climate finance, to implement adaptation projects.
So the Philippines is actually making strides in crafting their first BR and BUR. So while we have an in-house expert on the ETF, I really appreciated day one's discussion on adaptation in the ETF, since what we are working on now, as of now, is mostly the mitigation content of the national communications. So it's good to have advanced information on the adaptation part. So that is something that I can relay to my team in moving forward with BUR and NC. But what I loved the most in the 5-day course was actually the climate risk assessment. I believe that is in day 3, because I love where they disaggregated the elements of risk and actually used them in their M&E process. So I find Korea's M&E process eye-opening, because it just shows that there is a range of methodologies and practices a country can employ in tracking adaptation progress. Also, while we are currently developing the M&E systems, the broader M&E systems for the Philippines, climate finance, adaptation, and mitigation, this would be useful in designing the institutional arrangements, the methodologies and practices, the actual theories and practice for M&E. I think that is something that I will look back and relate to the team.
Without any doubt, the Academy is a good opportunity to exchange knowledge, technique, and technology.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So this was a nice video from our participants that we have heard. So now we will move on to the Q&A section of this presentation today. So I would like to ask, maybe we will start, we have about 45 audiences online, and we have some audiences also about here. So I will start with the audience here in person. So if you have any questions to the panel members, then we will start with you, and then we will go to the online. Please also introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you. This is Muniruz Zaman Khan. I'm from Bangladesh, and as well as I'm from BRAC also. BRAC is one of the largest NGO in the world. And we are also doing not too many, but many adaptation works, especially in our coastal belt, and also the most climatic hotspot. But the problem is, we always say that the youth, they are the change maker. But at the same time, for that youth, we have to provide training. And what kind of training we are give them, that knowledge is also important, the appropriate knowledge. So I don't know that how that UNFCCC, they are helping these young people, because they are the next leader. And at the same time, they are working in their particular community. If we make any climate change, that local level planning, but without building capacity, it is not possible to implement any kind of adaptation project. Thank you.
Hi. All right, we have one
more. Thank you. My name is George Masengere from the metropolitan area of Kampala, Kampala, Uganda. This is a very good program, but in addition to what the brother has indicated, it is very important to have a number of capacity building programs that embraces the people at the grassroots who face some of these challenges. Because if you're looking at building resilience, number one thing is to look at cities. How are cities? Because cities are at the ground levels, planning and having climate action, which are basically adaptation. And you may realize that some of our cities are in low-lying places. So if you're talking about water and adaptation, it is very important that you build capacity right from the community and then through the planning, so that we can make inclusive plans and programs that build the capacity of our people to function. Then there was, in your presentation, you talked about you have specific programs that are tailored towards, within the academy, tailored towards the African continent, and training the experts to be able to embrace and share this knowledge. I needed more clarification on that. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Luciano. I'm a researcher with Fundación Torcuato Di Tella. I took the first sessions of the Academy 2 months ago, right? It ended. It was wonderful. I'm really grateful for it. I have one particular question. During the last part, mostly, of the sessions, we were talking a lot about data and about the evaluation mechanisms, as my colleague mentioned today. I have a specific inquiry on this, which is how we should address the work with national statistics offices where we could get a good basis and a good normalized basis with normalized methodologies, harmonized methodologies, which let us assess and address most of or some of these issues, which are not about climate practitioners, but about statisticians, right? So I was thinking about the nexus between this program and other programs such as those of the Statistics Commission of the UN, and so. Thank you.
Maybe the answer and then we do. Okay, thank you very much. Maybe we'll start with the first question. I'll give it to John, and also the second, and to the other panel members. And maybe Jigme, the last question on the NSOs, you could address that. Okay, all
Can you, super. So my name's John Matthews. I apologize that I had to arrive late. I'm a colleague of Alex Morona, who arranged the presentation, is not here remotely. We're with a group called AGWA, Alliance for Global Water Adaptation. And we're like the connective tissue across the 3 campuses, and work very closely with CASTT and with our colleagues at the UNFCCC. And these questions actually are fantastic. I'd say that they're really 2 questions. One of them is who needs capacity, and both at pointing out especially young people, and then people like that are real practitioners at that local level, and then also the kind of technical aspects of how. Like we don't need to ask anymore about why we need to work on climate change, why adaptation is important. That's not the issue. The NDCs are really new. We're still trying to figure out where they are. There's no report card really, especially on the adaptation and resilience side, to say what's a good one and what's a bad one. And if I can take something away and like point something out to you from those video voices, those people are all young. Those are the people who are charged with delivering the NDCs. They are all young professionals. They are young people. And they have, I've met them from 100 countries because of my colleagues Bava and Jigme. They have hard jobs. And you don't go to university in this. The universities haven't caught up with this yet. There are no textbooks to teach you how to implement an NDC. And that's what the Adaptation Academy is really trying to do. It's trying to take these people that have been given an almost impossible job and give them the skills right now to make the Paris Agreement something that's practical and realistic and goes from across the ministries all the way down to those villages. And that's the heart of it. That's really the passion. And I think you saw like very serious faces with those young people. No? Like they were focused on how hard their job is. I mean, as someone who was attending, like it is overwhelming. I remember sitting on a plane after one of the initial workshops we had 3 years ago with a young woman from Central America, and she said, "I still live with my parents." You know, that these are people who they're just starting their own families, and they have very junior, maybe mid-level jobs, and they really need these kinds of skills, and that's what I think is so exciting about the academy, that it's trying to build exactly the kind of capacity that you were talking about, sir, that you needed in Bangladesh, and that really we need in every country. And so we picked these 3 universities because they understand one really key element, which is that most of our adaptation work, most of our resilience work, it's really about how we think about water. It's not everything, but it's a lot. And so like the data question, that's also often like a hydrometeorological data question, right? It's understanding, you know, what is it that we count, what's the kind of larger water cycle that we're in, and how we make sure that the scientists, the technical people, the people who have the data, that they're working as part of your team inside the government to really deliver and enable the right kind of action. And that is very, very powerful. Like it's making you, as someone who's attended the class, someone that's working on an NDC in your country, it's making you the conductor of the orchestra. So. You want mine? Yeah, just take.
Now it's on. Yeah. Okay. Well, let me start with the question on how do we make use of statistical offices. And probably when we talk of this training capacity building, maybe we should take a step back and think through a bit on, because when you talk of this capacity building, to me there are few questions, and those questions are, in fact, the first question is really who needs the most on any given day, and then the second question is how do you make best use of the capacity that was built, and third is how do you retain it, and all of this, I think all of these questions are equally important, because otherwise we will always be in this constant cycle of you build the capacity, you don't have place to use the capacity that was built, and then that capacity gets lost, and then again, you are always in this cycle. So at the end of the day, I feel that it all comes down to institutional setup and arrangement. And part of that equation would be to how do you make best use of the existing systems, arrangements that you have in place. And that's where I think the National Statistical Offices comes in, especially as it relates to data and information. Because rather than starting completely something from the scratch, you can with some quick fixes, but I think it's easier said than done, especially when sectoral politics come into play, things can be quite complicated. But I think it's, in terms of effort needed, it's much easier to do some quick fixes. And there are a number of good examples of how some countries have managed to do that. In the Secretariat, we recognizing that national statistical offices have potential to play critical role in climate, especially in terms of climate reporting. So we are trying to encourage countries to actually start engaging with the statistical offices and find ways to work, bring them as a part of the institutional setup that they would have in the country, recognizing that the setup will be different from a country to country, reflecting the national circumstances of individual countries. This brings to this question of there are a lot of actors on the ground who needs capacity building, and I think to some extent it is linked to this question of who needs the most at what point in time, right? We understand that the needs on the ground is very overwhelming. And there is no way that, we have to be frank here, there is no way that this academy can claim and say we will be able to meet all the needs. So we have to prioritize. And right now, our strategy priority is to target those people, those actors that can potentially have a knock-on effect or be an agent of change. So which means we are right now aiming at government officials who might, with capacity building, will be able to play a multiplier effect. So they might be able to develop a project proposal which can then include further capacity building component, so on and so forth. We are also taking on board independent consultants, because we know that for foreseeable future, at least for another next 5-6 years, most developing countries will need to depend on the consultants, external consultants, and it's probably better that we also build the capacity of this consultant so that any input that they provide in will be a quality one. And then on this youth and gender, these are very two important aspects. And to be honest, we in the secretariat, we do not have expertise of how to train youth, gender in our this thing. We are probably very good at supporting negotiation. Beyond that, in terms of rolling out this training, capacity building, that's not our forte. And that's why, for that very same reason, we are bringing in other partners who will be able to, who have experience, expertise in training. So, but this is very important issue, and we will need to find ways to, I think we have some elements along the lines of, addressing gender, youth in our training program. But I must say that's not sufficient, and we'll need to do more to enhance. We have also...
Yep. So we have received a few questions from our online partner audience. So maybe the first question I could ask, who serves as instructors for the course? Maybe I could ask Dr. Moore to first address this. As we've already mentioned here, who it is, you've seen it is UNFCCC. We have professors and other academic institutions involved. So maybe Dr. Moores, you could highlight a few from your institute, and then we'll go to also Dr. Woon after.
Yeah, I think it was also already partly answered. I think it's a combination of people coming from the different partners that help us to organize and implement actually the training courses. I think what we find quite important in there is in the interdisciplinarity that is in there, coming from the different instructors, but also coming from the different participants. And I do think that that also came forward from the people who already joined in the different courses, is that we're also looking for the peer-to-peer learning coming from the people that are engaged already in the reporting part. So I think this mixture gives quite nice wealth of information from different levels on what you can do in there. And maybe if I may, I think that's also important to realize that we also have the Sustainable Development Goals on the table, which also require a quite strong link. And what you will see that a number of the NDCs from countries, they already make this link to the Sustainable Development Goals as well as on the adaptation plans. And I think that also is a quite nice, strong link, where from the partners that are already engaged now with the Adaptation Academy, I think we can have a quite nice setup and informative training course.
Thank you. Dr. Woon, if you would like to answer, similarly, what type of expertise AIT is bringing into this training? You're still, muted.
As Eddie has said, this has got to be a balance across the spectrum type of expertise. We have faculty members who do research on the most advanced edges of knowledge in climate change or in water involved. But we have practitioners, people who are working at the grassroots level, as one audience member has said, also, involved. And we have policymakers also involved. And the benefit of such a academy is not only you need the academic rigor, you need the evidence-based knowledge and research basis, and then you also need the practical aspect. And as one of the testimonial has said, one of the big benefits is not really the lectures, but really talking to each other and talking to colleagues from around the world, talking with people with similar problems, talking with people that may have a solution that applies in your area. And this type of interaction among the students is just as important as just listening to some lecture. So I think that you will have a mixture of very blended knowledge and experience base.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Woon. And lastly, I would like to give it to Dr. Shin. And I think we already heard one testimonial from a participant, so please.
So in KACCC in Korea Environment Institute, we have specialists on the planning processes, and we have many experiences in making adaptation planning. So we are focused on the processes, and each process we have an expert about how to explain climate scenarios to the governors, and how to do risk assessment, and how to deliver the risk assessment data to the governors and politicians. And we have we are specialized in the making the adaptation planning processes. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We have actually run over time. If you do have questions, we are still around, so you can please come up to us. So for the closing, I would like to give it over to John. We have 2 minutes, John, so please, thanks.
First, I just want to say thank you for attending, and I'm really grateful for all of this partnership. I also, in part, because I'm from the U.S., I'd like to, at least in a small way, represent Oregon State University, the third university that, because of the time zone differences, it's hard for them to join. What I would like to say is that with the NDCs, we should almost think of the N as meaning new. And it's our job, each country's job, to be able to interpret, to give meaning and credibility to the NDCs. And that means that often it's not a minister who makes that decision. It's someone that's probably in the middle of a ministry. Someone that's trying to look across to other ministries, exactly as Ms. Lotia from Pakistan said. And that also has to look up to the UNFCCC and has to look down to the cities and the communities, as the colleague from Uganda here in the audience said today. That's a hard job, and it's a new job. And what the Adaptation Academy and its hope is to be able to give people the tools and not least at all the connections with each other, so that we can create a kind of community of people who are learning to make the NDCs really credible, that ultimately are going to make the Paris Agreement credible. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So thank you all for joining. We're still here for a few minutes if you have any questions. And thank you to our online panelists as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.